Welcome to Banyan Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyan.com. Since 1970, Banyan Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyan.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Branches of Wisdom, the Banyan Books audio-video podcast and live streaming series. I'm your host, Ross McKeechee, and for those who watch us regularly, yes, I'm in a different space today. I've just finished moving. I haven't had a chance to set this up nicely yet, so that's kind of a sterile background, I know, but just giving you some context for where I'm at. And we're really delighted about our guest today, Deb Dana. Before I introduce her, I want to let you know that most of Banyan's podcast and event series are free, and we welcome your donations to keep these programs accessible for all. Just go ahead and click on the PayPal link in the show description below. Also, towards the end of our conversation today, we'll be taking questions from you, our live audience. So go ahead and start typing those into the comments field on YouTube, and we'll tend to as many of those as we can. Banyan Books would also like to acknowledge that although we have people joining from all over the world for these live streaming events, the physical location of Banyan Books and Sound is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Okay, our guest today, Deb Dana, who's a licensed clinical social worker, is a clinician, consultant, and international speaker specializing in using the lens of Polyvagal Theory to understand and resolve the impact of trauma and create ways of working that honor the role of the autonomic nervous system. She is a founding member of the Polyvagal Institute and the author of several books, including Polyvagal Practices, Anchored, and Polyvagal Exercises for Safety and Connection. Today, Deb Dana is with Banyan Books in conversation about her new book, The Nervous System Workbook: Practical Exercises to Ease Anxiety, Find Safety, and Come Home to Yourself using Polyvagal Theory. This is a guide to understand and befriend your unique nervous system and find your way back to safety and calm in times of stress. In this book, Deb shares more than 50 short practices and exercises that teach you to understand how your personal nervous system works and how to find more safety and ease within yourself. And I just want you to know that this book is very, very accessible and easy to work through. It's not like a big textbook. You can take any exercise through the day and go through it. You don't have to move in order. You can be very self-directed, and it's really easy to work with. Really short, simple to understand, and I found it really effective and helpful. If you want to learn more about Deb Dana and her work, you can visit her website, which is rhythmofregulation.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Deb Dana.
Hi, Ross. It's so fun to be here with you.
Fun to be here with you too, Deb. Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the book, you talk about polyvagal theory as the silence of feeling safe enough to fall in love with life. Mm-hmm. And I've seen in other places you add to the end of that. So you say the science of feeling safe enough to fall in love with life and take the risks of living.
Yes.
Such a poetic way of framing this. Can you tell us more about that statement?
Yeah. I mean, polyvagal theory really is a way to understand how we are human, right? And understand how we can come to a place of feeling safe enough, connected enough to really experience our lives, right? To be in our lives and to I do like to take the risks of being here, right? And seeing what's going to emerge. And again, it's not our brains that bring that to us. It's our body, it's our nervous system that brings the information up the pathways to our brains, and then our brains make up the stories that we hear, we live as we move through life. So, I like that. It felt nice because it is science, and the workbook is based on the science of polyvagal theory, and then we bring in the sort of the more the more delightful ways of exploring not simply the scientific terminology, but the joy of sort of feeling into what's it like to feel, as though, oh, this is a moment of safety, or this is a moment when I'm feeling a bit unsafe, right? And those moments happen, the course of the day, moment to moment to moment. Right. When we first met just a few minutes ago, I was feeling a little unnerved, right? Because I don't know you and I don't know what we're doing, and it's a new platform, and oh my gosh, you can feel it all, right? And then we got a chance to connect, which is what the nervous system wants. It wants to connect with other nervous systems. And I started feeling, anchored in safety. So that now it's like, oh, now we can have fun. Right now we can explore wherever we want, and we feel safe enough to do that, to take that risk.
Right. And I got to say, you're a very warm and fun person to connect with. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, our nervous systems are feeling that, and then our brains are making a story that brings that to life, right? But in its beginning, that's a nervous system experience. Right, I'm sending cues of safety, and you're sending cues of safety, and our nervous systems are feeling as if they can join and then see where it goes. Yeah.
Right. One of the terms that is used a lot when we're talking about our nervous systems is regulation.
Mm.
Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about what that means? What does it mean to be regulated?
Yeah, and I think it can be misunderstood or misused as well, because a regulated nervous system, in the way I think about it and teach about it, is not a system that is always feeling safe, okay. Right? It's not a system that always is in that the ventral state, we call it, the state of safety and connection. It's a system that moves in and out of that with some flexibility. That's what I consider regulation, the ability to dysregulate, to move into a bit of unease, a bit of anxiety, even a bit of collapse or shutdown, and find the way back to feeling present here, safe and okay. So to me, that's regulation. And I think it's important to think of it that way, because we don't want to we don't want the goal to be always be in that place of safety connection, because that's unachievable for any human, right? Not what we want. That takes something away from life. We need all of the what happens in life when we have these moments of frustration or anxiety or oh my God, I'm overwhelmed, and then find our way back. So for me, that's what we talk about when we talk about regulation.
Right. And I just want to quote you to kind of maybe hammer this point home a little bit. You wrote, "It's normal and expected to not feel regulated 24 hours a day, and instead move in and out of different states."
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know for me, one of the biggest challenges, and probably for a lot of people, is self-judgment in relation to the different emotional and nervous system states. So I'm wondering, do you have any insights on how we can learn to accept the different states without judging ourselves?
Yeah, it's interesting, because when we learn the biology of it, and we learn that, oh, when I get a little anxious, right, I move out of that place of feeling, regulated and connected, and I get a little anxious. If I can hold on to enough regulation to be curious, Because my nervous system is trying to communicate something to me. Every time I have an anxiety moment or an angry moment or even a moment of collapse, going through the motions, but I don't really have energy to care. That's my nervous system trying to tell me something. So if we can learn to be curious about that, we get a lot of information, right? The hard part is that when we move into that sympathetic state of fight and flight, of anger, anxiety, then along with that comes self-criticism, self-blame, right? That all of that I'm bad, something's wrong with me, I sometimes call that survival state the land of should, because that's where I should be better able to do this. I should, have taken care of this, or shouldn't, right? But that's what happens there. And if we can, even have a drop or two of that energy of regulation, then we can be curious rather than being in the should. We can say, ooh, what just happened? Right? What just moved me into this place of anger or this place of anxiety? Right. So, the same is true for the other survival state, which is, we call it dorsal, but it's the state of collapse, of shutdown, of disconnect, right? It's the land of disappearing, right? It's like, oh, I'm no longer here. I don't care. I don't have the energy. I give up. Why bother? It's that flavor. And I think oftentimes that's a hard place because people judge us for being in that place. Right. There's somehow less judgment when you're angry or anxious. People go, oh, I get that. Right. I can help you fix it, which is not what we want to do either. But when you're in this sort of, give up, hopeless place, you get judged. People make up a story about you. You don't care. You don't want to try. You're bored. That's the story that they make up, and then they sort of, push you away. When what your nervous system is saying is, I am totally overwhelmed and I have lost all my energy and I need help.
Wow. Yeah. Maybe this is a good point. I just want to let our audience know we're gonna have a discussion, but Deb's also going to lead us through a couple of different exercises. So this will be a little bit more interactive and exercise oriented too. And I realized, Deb, I forgot to mention to you about the audience questions, which we do usually the last 15 minutes. And
Great.
I'll read them out to you. The audience will type them in, and I'll read out some questions to you.
That'll be fun. It's nice to know there's an audience out there, right?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, I love talking with you and I love that we're having this, but it's nice to know that there are people out there who are on the journey with us at this moment.
Yeah. We have a great community at Banyan Books, and folks, please keep your questions rolling in. We love them.
Nice.
So maybe it's a good time to go over the 3 organizing principles of polyvagal theory so people have that context.
Sure. Yeah, because we've been talking about them without really naming them. So let's name them. And I'm going to do them sort of in a backwards order because I think co-regulation, which is the one I usually go to last, but it's so important. And it feels like that's what's happening between your nervous system and mind. We're co-regulating, right? There's an ebb and flow. There's a back and forth that happens when we're in that place of co-regulation. Co-regulation is something every human needs. First, when we're born, we can't survive without another human to help regulate our system, but over the course of our lifetime, we need people in our life who we can, feel safe with, and who we can do that dance with, the dance of connection. And also people who, if I'm feeling, down and out, or I'm feeling overwhelmed and angry, I have someone I can reach out to, knowing that they can stay regulated and help me find my way back. So co-regulation is incredibly important. We call it a biological imperative, which simply means it's something you can't live without, right? So you can survive once you've reached a certain point in childhood without others, but you can't thrive, right? So, and I will say in my work with, trauma survivors, when they say, when I let them know you need people in your life, their response is people are dangerous, right? That's often the lesson we have learned people are dangerous. So then that's a paradox. How do I find people to have in my life when my nervous system says people are dangerous? So that's sort of the thing we're always working with, right? The drive to survive and the longing to connect. How do we bring those together? So that's co-regulation. And then let's talk for a minute about neuroception. And neuroception is the word that Steve Porges created. I love that we make up our own language as we go along, which is so fun. So neuroception is the way the nervous system takes in information and then assesses what to do next. Is it safe or not safe? And neuroception uses 3 pathways: inside, outside, between. I think we're going to do a practice around that later, which would be fun. But neuroception, micro moment to micro moment, is receiving information. Right. So, I'm receiving information from your nervous system, from the environment around me, from inside my own body. Right. And all of that comes together and then either moves me toward or away. It says, yes, feel safe, or no, be on guard. So that's neuroception. And what neuroception does is it moves you somewhere on the hierarchy, which is the 3rd organizing principle. And that's, again, Steve's brilliant work describing these 3 states and the way we move through them. And we talked just a bit about, ventrals, the state of safety and connection. That is the place I truly believe that the human nervous system longs to get to, that we have a longing for that place of safety and connection. And I think each nervous system inherently knows how to get there, right? I've seen in my work with trauma survivors that if we just, can find the first step on that pathway, the nervous system then partners with us and helps the client come back to that place, sometimes an unfamiliar place, right? But that place of safety and connection is wired into every human biology. And isn't that wonderful to think about, right? Your nervous system, that place is waiting for you. It's waiting for every human to find it and to be able to anchor there for a while. That brings physical and psychological well-being, and it's part of your biology. I think that's amazing. Right. And then we have the other 2 places on the hierarchy. When we leave safety and connection, the first place we go down 1 step on the hierarchy is sympathetic fight and flight. And most people know fight and flight, right? We've been talking about fight and flight forever, right? The fight's the angry, rageful, frustrated, aggressive pathway. And the flight is the anxious, panicked, worried pathway. And both of those are survival responses that your nervous system brings you to when the world feels overwhelming, when you cannot cope. You go to fight and flight. Everybody goes there next. If that place can help you feel better, you can come back to regulation, right? If, however, it doesn't resolve the problem, it doesn't help you feel like, oh, I'm out of this trap of anger or anxiety, you go to the bottom of the hierarchy, to the oldest part of the nervous system, which is this dorsal place that takes you to collapse, to shut down, to disconnect, to giving up, to feeling hopeless, to despairing, right? And even when I talk about it, I can feel some of that in my system, right? Because it's like it's right there waiting to rescue us. Right. And again, it's that place that we don't choose. We do not choose fight, flight, shut down. Your nervous system chooses it for you. Right. And, one of the things we talk about is we have a tendency, each one of us, to lean more toward fight and flight or toward shut down, collapse. Right. That over the course of your lifetime, your system kind of says, oh, this works. I get this one works well, effective, I'm going there more often, right? And so, I invite our listeners to think where they go. You can think which one is your more familiar place. I like to say we have a home in regulation, we have a home in ventral and safety, and then we have a home away from home. So this home away from home is either sympathetic or dorsal. It's either fight, flight, or collapse. My home away from home is collapse, right? My nervous system for decades now has said this is the best place for you to go. And so when the world feels overwhelming, I travel through sympathetic quickly and end up in dorsal. It's just the way it is. I know that. I have befriended my system. I know that. So I have some strategies to work with that. What's yours? If you were thinking about yours.
Well, I think for me, the first thing that came to mind is it depends on the stimulus, what's going on, and
Mm-hmm.
to how I'll respond. I find in certain situations, I'm more likely to disconnect,
Mm-hmm.
and others, I'm more likely to lash out,
Nice.
depending. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it dependent on the people or the environment or the?
I think it's based on my senses, my upbringing, and how I responded to things in my family
Mm-hmm.
home. So if
Yep.
it's a trigger that reminds me of a certain thing, and that
Yep.
whatever that survival mechanism that I learned.
Yeah. 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 See, and that's the both the beauty and the challenge of the nervous system is everything is wired in. Right. So all these experiences, your nervous system lived all those experiences. And when a familiar flavor, comes up in present day, the nervous system can go way back and get, oh, that feels like that back there. And off we go. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So those are the three organizing principles. And I think if you get a understanding, an embodied understanding of those, then you really have a roadmap to understanding how you're moving through your days.
Right. Okay. So just to recap for our audience, we were talking about overall the three organizing principles of polyvagal theory. We started with co-regulation, then we had neuroception, and then we were just talking about the autonomic hierarchy with the
Yes,
ventral vagal, sympathetic, and dorsal vagal.
exactly.
Okay.
Beautiful.
I had a question about co-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about your view about, when we're co-regulating with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I'm a highly unregulated nervous system
Mm-hmm.
and you're highly self-regulated in this
Mm-hmm.
moment. Have you identified any kind of measurable or observable thresholds where one person's nervous system kind of will set the tone over the others?
Yeah. Yes, and I like to call ventral that state of safety and connection of an unopposable force. I mean that's how I think about it. If I can stay truly anchored in that state of ventral, in that state of safety and connection, and then transmit that, communicate that to your nervous system is going to feel that, is going to feel the safety, the cues of safety, and is going to have a response. The trouble is that often we co-dysregulate, right? That I lose my ability to regulate, and you go to sympathetic, and then I go to sympathetic, and then I go to dorsal, and then without ventral in the experience, we have no ability to do anything except be in survival, right? So as a clinician, it's my job to be regulated with my clients, and oftentimes when a client comes to therapy and I'm regulated and stay regulated, that's a very unfamiliar experience for their nervous system. They're used to having people dysregulate around them, right? So we're offering a new experience. I think the same is true. We can expand that to parents and kids, partners, colleagues, coworkers, friends. There has to be one regulated system in the room in order for, those things to happen. If everybody's dysregulated, everybody's in survival. And as soon as we move to survival, I did want to say your prefrontal cortex goes into hypoactive mode. So you no longer can think and plan and do all the things, that you need to do to find your way out.
Okay. Maybe we could go into the exercise around inside, outside,
Sure.
between for neuroception.
Let's do that. I love that one. And this one's in part one in the befriending section. And the befriending is really about getting to know. And really, it's that information gathering, which is what we spend so much time gathering information, getting to know. How does this, I often think about this is the vehicle I'm driving through life. And how does it work? Right. So let's do inside, outside, in between. All right. So your nervous system works tirelessly to answer the question, am I safe? That's what it's doing all the time. right? And it uses 3 pathways: inside, which is in my body; outside, which is the environmental experience; and between. I love the between, because the between is nervous system to nervous system. And we don't think about that pathway. That's sort of the below the level of conscious awareness pathway, which is again how the nervous system is working. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring conscious awareness to this non-conscious process. Okay. And the first thing we want to do is we want to think about the 2 categories of, cues of safety, cues of danger. Right. And in the workbook, I put the categories as welcome and warning. Right. Because I was looking for something that felt, the word safety can feel dangerous to people. Right. So we wanted to find some words that felt different. So a welcome and a warning. Right. And so let's use this moment in time. Right. In the workbook, you get to choose a moment and reflect on it. But let's use this moment. Right. So in this moment, and we're going to start inside. So in this moment, if you moved inside your body and did some sort of a body scan, if you just sort of felt what was going on, can you identify at least one welcome and one warning? What do you notice?
Would you like me to respond?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna let all the audience members write something down, because really that's what we want. We want to write down and say, what do I notice? And it's interesting. We want to find at least one of each. It's usually easier to find the warnings. Did you find a warning?
Yeah, I think for me, because I'm doing a live stream with you right now, there is a certain hyper vigilance to stay focused and follow and track the conversation, and be looking at the time, all those things.
So you can feel the tenseness or
yes.
Yeah. And is there a welcome inside your body as well? What's happening there?
There's also a welcome. I feel the heart in this conversation. So I feel the warmth and that in my heart. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So that's an example, and our listeners can see what they find. Oftentimes it's easier to find the warning because it's a pain or a constriction or a coldness or a numbness or something that feels off. And then, look for the welcome, because the welcome is there too. The nervous system loves both and, right? It needs both and. So we're looking for both a warning and a welcome. So let's move to the environmental. I'm going to laugh now because we were talking about your environment earlier, but move to the place you're in, right? Or it could be my place because you're looking at my place. But where's a warning and a welcome that you sense in the environment?
I think the warning for me, the most obvious, is nobody can see it, but I've got a light that's shining into my face for the lighting. So that would be the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there a welcome in this new space that you're in?
There is. I mean, again, you can't see, but I'm looking out the window at the garden and trees, and I can see the wind moving the branches.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Beautiful. And just a curiosity, does the welcome outweigh the warning, or does the warning outweigh the welcome in this moment?
In this moment, the welcome outweighs the warning. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. So then let's go to the between, right? And so, we can use our nervous systems because we're here together. So in this between, feeling of energy moving between, is there a welcome and a warning?
So, I mean, you as a person are very welcoming.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, right from when we met, I felt that connection and ease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about the warning?
Maybe because you're older than me and a person of knowledge in this subject matter, there's a certain, there's a certain sense of this person is an authority.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And when you feel that warning, what does your nervous system do?
It wants to behave with the proper decorum. I think,
Got it.
it's a certain need to behave appropriately.
So there's a bit of a should or something that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Great. So, we would, in the workbook, the invitation is to find all of the welcomes and warnings that you can think of about a moment. And then, we were saying, does one outweigh the other? Because that's really what happens. If the warnings outweigh the welcomes, then we need to adjust that somehow, because our neuroception is then one of unsafety, and we will have a hard time being regulated. But if the welcomes outweigh the warnings, then we're, good to move forward and engage. And it's not outnumber. It's not a 1-to-1. Like, you might have 2 welcomes and 8 warnings, and the welcomes could still be more powerful in your system than those warnings. Right. So it's interesting to see what is, like, you're looking out your window and you're seeing this beautiful garden and trees and nature. And that's a powerful welcome for your system. Right. And it outweighs that really bright light that's shining in your eyes. That's a pretty powerful welcome, right? So once we figure that out, we can think, oh, so nature, greenery, whatever this is a welcome for me. I can build that in. Right. So that's, we get this information and we think, oh, right, my nervous system really has some good ideas about what feels welcoming. And then you look at the warnings, right? We'll take the light again, because why not? We're here. You're going to figure that light out before you do the next one of these, right? Because you've got the message. This does not feel good to my nervous system. And so then the message comes and your brain says, we can do something about that, right? You can take an action. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
All of this reminds me so much, I mean, of mindfulness practice.
Mhm, mhm.
Is this work been influenced by different mindfulness methodologies, or?
It's interesting, because yes, it is. I mean, what we're doing is we're bringing the implicit embodied experience of the nervous system into explicit awareness so that we can do something with it, right? And I love that you talk about mindfulness practices, because um, um, in working with people who have very sensitive nervous systems, and in working with trauma survivors where systems are in survival most of the time, I learned early on, if you invite somebody into a mindfulness practice, they go further into dysregulation. It's terrifying, because mindfulness in its large experience, you need to slow down. You need to be in the present moment. You need to move inside. And if you have created a way of surviving by not being in the present moment, by not being in your body, right? Many trauma survivors live from the neck up. They're not in their body, and we're worried, we're planning, we're not in the present moment. That invitation to be mindful is terrifying. And so, I would use, let's just, think for a moment about, even the word awareness is challenging, right? So yes, these are all, some form of mindfulness practice, awareness practices, but they're done more in an external, let's look at, so we have a little bit of distance so that it feels safe enough to get to know. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm not associating it with this mindfulness practice, which might be this overwhelming
Mhm. Mhm.
spiritual thing. That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned neurodiversity in the book, and
Mhm.
I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about neurodiversity
Mhm.
versus being neurotypical, and
Yep.
how that impacts our approach
Yeah.
of working with the nervous
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I am still learning, I will say, and I'm still talking with people who, really, are out there moving the world of neurodiversity forward. Um, for me, and I do a lot of workshops and demos with people, and I often have people volunteer to do a demo, and they say, I'm neurodiverse. And I say, great, let's get to know your nervous system, right? Because at this level of work, at the workbook level, at the clinical level of doing work with someone, it doesn't much matter for me how you identify. What matters for me is I need to get to know your nervous system and the way it is organized, and the pathways and the patterns. right? And every nervous system does that in a bit of a different way. So whether you identify as neurotypical or neurodiverse in all of its many, many ways, the first step is to get to know your nervous system and do that with someone else as well. If you're, whoever's in your life, I also think it's interesting to, have people create small groups or families or partners or, and spend time getting to know yours and the other nervous system as well. So it sort of takes the, I don't know whether it doesn't take the label away, but we do it differently because I just want to get to know your nervous system, right? Help me understand how it works, right? And if you need certain things to not be there, because again, if we talk about the cues of welcome and warning, every nervous system has different cues of warning and different cues of welcome. And so I just want to get to know, if we're going to work together, what yours are, so we can create the way of working that respects that. So it's an interesting dilemma, isn't it? Yeah.
I hear you. Okay. So I just want to reiterate again for our audience, part 1 of the workbook, that's all about exercises for befriending the nervous system, what you were just talking about, getting to know the nervous system. And then
Yep.
part 2 is titled Coming Home to Safety and Connection. And about that part, you write, the exercises in part 2 are designed to help you create greater capacity to anchor in regulation, expand your ability to feel safe, and navigate daily experiences in new ways. Can you just expand on this a little bit? Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I do want to say again, the ability to anchor in regulation is not simply because, yes, it does, increase our physical and psychological well-being. Regulation is directly connected to feeling physical and psychological health, right? So there is that. And it also, as we have more access to anchoring and regulation, it allows us to turn toward the suffering, to turn toward the challenges that come into our everyday lives, or perhaps the bigger, suffering that we carry from earlier. It allows us to turn toward that and be able to work with it, so that I can be with my suffering and I can remember it, I can reflect on it rather than relive it, right? So there's 2 reasons to really build the capacity to anchor in ventral. 1, because yes, it's healthier for us, but 2, because it allows us to then, work with, things that have happened in the past that are still sitting unresolved in our system, or, in the world we're living in right now, every day brings challenges. Right. And if I don't have the capacity to hold on to ventral, I am simply going to be pulled into my survival responses over and over and over because of those challenges. So that, I think, is important to remember, that it's not to turn away from the difficult things, it's to create the ability to turn toward safely.
Right. And I think we were going to look at an exercise from part 2, which is called anchored or anchoring in safety.
Yes. Yes. Let's do that. And, I'll just say for a moment, I use the word anchored or anchoring a lot. And my first book with Sounds True was titled Anchored, right? And I grew up in Maine. I grew up in the coast of Maine, where, anchors and boats are just a part of everyday life. And if we think for a moment, and I'll invite people to think about what word you would use to feel held in that place of connection. A lot of people use grounded or rooted. And when I thought about grounded and rooted, my system felt constrained, right? Other people feel like it's a freedom. I felt constrained. And so for me, anchored, because an anchor sits on the seabed, but there's a lot of, they call it anchor road between the anchor and the boat that allows you to do this. And for me, that's what I want. I want the ability to do this, knowing I'm held safely as well. So yes, anchored. I do a lot of anchored and anchoring in my writing and my work. So this one is about creating, I call them anchors, right? Creating anchors in certain categories that we know, predictably help us feel that sense of safety and connection. And we can reach for an anchor when we know I need a little more energy of connection, energy of safety. I can reach for an anchor. So again, I'm going to invite people to do this. And I'm going to invite you to think about it and put you on the spot. How's that for you?
Sounds great.
That's okay. You're still anchored in safety, huh?
I think so. Let's see.
All right. And I like to start with people, right? I think because co-regulation is so important. So the question is, who are the people in your life who bring you a sense of feeling safe and welcome? So who are those people that bring you that sense that, oh, I'm safe here and I'm welcome, right? And it could also be a pet, because, pets are important. They're members of our family. So it could be a pet. If you struggle with people, it can be a pet. So who's a person or pet for you?
My friend Olivia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she is an anchor in your world. She's in the people category. She's a who that shows up for you. Yeah. Yeah. And you may have anchors for different, like you had different responses because of in your neuroception, right? You may have anchors that work differently. You may have an anchor for your work world. You may have a different anchor for your personal world. Where's Olivia? Is she more general anchor for anywhere, or where does she live?
She lives in my, just life, like go to share. I can share any kind of emotion or anything in my life with her.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Nice. And is there anybody else? And you don't have to name names, but is there somebody, or you can name names?
Yeah, for sure. My teacher, Yogacharini Maitre, who I work with closely, she's definitely a huge anchor for me. Yeah.
Nice. And the lovely thing about people who are anchors is, even as you're just telling me about them and remembering and bringing them to mind, you can feel it come alive in your system. Right. So we don't have to necessarily be able to reach out and have coffee, or reach out and connect over the internet. We can remember moments and we feel that anchor come alive. Right. Yeah. So, hopefully people find, when I start with my clients, I say one, just find one, see what happens. Right. And if your listeners, if any of our listeners are in the role of being a helping professional, you are often the person for your clients in the beginning, because there hasn't been anybody else who's been predictably regulated, right? So that takes us to what? So what are the places in your world that bring you a sense of belonging? Where are those places? They might be in nature, they might be at work, they might be in your home, in your new home. Where are the places for you?
For me, being close to the ocean, or a waterfall, river, a body of water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you near water?
I am. I live close to water. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That's interesting, because I wrote that in mine. I said the sea is my go-to anchoring place. And even when I can't get there, the memory of being there brings me quickly to regulation, because again, we remember the moments of being by the sea, right? You can feel it, you can hear it, right? Even when you're not able to be there. Yeah. Where else would be aware for you?
Yeah, if I were to mix it up a little bit, I'd say being in a nice warm cafe, sitting with a cup of tea,
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And the wares can be places in the world. They can be, houses of worship. They can be in nature. There's no end to finding a where. The invitation is, if you're having trouble finding a where, is to, as you move through your day, begin to notice, ooh, what do I feel like in this place, and begin to explore where your nervous system feels that sense of, oh, I want to stay here a while. That, I think, is the hallmark of an anchor, as a place, as a where. It's like, oh, I want to linger here a while. I want to come back here. Right. Yeah. So then the last is the what. What are the small things you do that feel nourishing and invite a sense of connection? What are, and these are not great big practices. That's a whole different category. These are just small things that remind you, oh, right, regulation is around. What's a small thing you do? Some simple, easy thing.
A very simple go-to for me is to just watch an episode of Star Trek.
I love it. Yeah, yeah. And there are many to choose from.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, what else? Just to give them people another option. What else?
Yeah. Another one would be, having a healthy snack. Just some,
I love it.
grounding a little bit with some healthy food.
I love it. I love
Mhm.
it. Yeah. I was thinking if I was where you are, I think looking out your window would be a simple thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, there, reminder. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Star Trek and a snack. I love it. This is great. See, we're getting to know your nervous system, which is fun, right? Right. I think I call it, we start to create autonomic intimacy, which is a different intimacy than the, other kinds of intimacy that we create. I know your nervous system, right? And so if you shot me a message sometime and said, "Oh, I'm feeling a little dysregulated. I'm feeling like I'm lost in that sympathetic place," I might say, "You got a good Star Trek episode to watch," right? Because I would then know that's an anchor for you, right? So not only do we identify for ourselves the anchors, but we also can then share them with other people, right? And say, these are my anchors. So if you notice that I'm struggling, remind me, go to the beach, look out the window, get a healthy snack, whatever it is, right? And that's I think the joy of creating a community that's different than the other community. It's they may be the same people, but it has a different way of communicating, right? I have people in my community, my autonomic community, that I can send a shorthand message. I can send an emoji to one of my friends and she knows, oh, Deb's feeling lost, alone. And she knows me well enough to know what to do to send back. And that's lovely because I don't want somebody to do this big thing. I just want somebody to say, yep, I'm here. I see you. I feel you. Right. And that's the joy of first knowing your own nervous system and knowing what helps and then sharing that with somebody else. So now everybody who's listening knows that Star Trek and snacks are good for you. Right?
That's right.
Mhm.
Deb, we've got some really nice questions coming in from the audience. Can we tend to some
Sure.
of those? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. One question is from Lindsay, who says, how do we find a welcome? I'm having a hard time identifying it.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because again, that's part of getting to know how your nervous system feels the neuroception of safety. So a welcome might be an embodied experience, right? You might feel, a relaxation or a flow or a warmth. You were talking about a warmth around your heart. A welcome might simply be a sense that, oh, this is okay. It could be a thought that comes in that go, oh, I like that. Right. And again, we can explore, Lindsay, the different ways that you can feel welcome. With my clients in the beginning, the welcome was often sort of in contrast to the warning because they could feel the warnings easily. And then it was like, what doesn't feel like a warning? And then we could explore, maybe that's the welcome. So if you can feel your warnings, then you're feeling something else, go, oh, that's not a warning. Right. Can that be a welcome? That's where I would start with that.
Thanks.
Mm.
Thanks for the question, Lindsay. And there's one here from Farah that says, does polyvagal theory have explanations for the character disorders like borderline personality disorder and why there's not any cure for this disorder available?
That's so fascinating because if you're truly going to sort of live and work practice from a polyvagal approach, we probably would get rid of diagnoses, because every diagnosis is some form of a dysregulated nervous system, right? That's where we go with that. So with borderline, it's that push-pull, right? That happens. A borderline person with borderline features is someone whose nervous system is dysregulated in the sympathetic fight and the dorsal collapse. And I move between, and I have a hard time finding any moments of ventral safety and connection. Right. That's how we think about that. And I probably would not say that these things are not, well, maybe not, and I wouldn't use the word cure, but they're reshapeable, because the nervous system is reshaping all the time. It's shaped by our early experience. And you talked about how your nervous system was shaped, and neuroception takes you to a certain place, right? But it's also being reshaped moment to moment. And so a lot of experiences of being held in regulation by others, a nervous system begins to reshape, and it begins to not have to move into those survival strategies of push-pull that we see in a borderline feature, right? So I think there's hope, and I think that's what I would say also about polyvagal theory, is it's a hopeful theory, because it is really showing us that you're not stuck in the patterns that you're in. Right now, if I'm going to work with someone who, is really bringing a lot of borderline features to the process, I have to truly be able to anchor solidly in ventral in regulation, and that other nervous system is going to test my capacity to do that. So it's not easy, but I do think it's possible.
Thank you. And thanks, Farah, for that question. One question from Lindsay. She says, I've read that autistic and ADHD folks generally have lower heart rate variability. How does polyvagal theory relate to people whose nervous systems are either naturally more hyper or hypoactive?
Yeah, it's interesting, because heart rate variability is a measure of nervous system health. It's a measure of overall health and well-being, and it's how we can sort of measure how efficiently the nervous system is working, right? Increased heart rate variability means more flexibility in my response. A low heart rate variability that I'm stuck in means I have a rigid responding system. So it's an interesting way to think about it, and a lot of research is going on around heart rate variability and using it as a measure. Again, as we become more able to come back to ventral, every time we dysregulate and come back, we build resilience, and more flexibility equates to a increase in heart rate variability. So it all sort of goes together, right? And some people really want to track their heart rate variability. That's reassuring for them. Others could care less, right? And so again, we're offering choice to people. Do you want to track heart rate variability? Because that can help show you when you are, really flexible, right? When you're, I need more energy. Like, to do this with you, I need more energy. So my heart rate variability goes up because I have more of that mobilizing energy in my system. Right. And then when we're done, it's been a really long day for me. I started this morning in the Netherlands at 7:30 in the morning. Right. And so it's been a long day. My guess is when we're done, I am going to feel my heart rate variability go down, and I'm going to rest for a bit. Right. So part of what we want to do is not assign meaning to the changes, but be curious about what's happening. Like, I need energy now, and then I'm going to rest. So it's interesting, and I do think it's the way of the future for understanding our humanness, is we're going to begin to, track things, have technology, all of these ways of seeing the nervous system in action, which I think is going to be brilliant. I think it's going to be fascinating to see it in that way as well.
I think we have time for one more question. And this one is from someone named Robot Pirate.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Okay.
great name.
Yep.
And Robot Pirate says, would you say that most of us are in a chronic state of dysregulation? Is dysregulation more common than regulation?
Oh, robot pirate. That is a great question, and something that we had talked about before we get on the state of the world right now, right? And around the globe, there are really challenging things happening, right? And as those are all cues of danger to our nervous system, and as they come in, we are being stretched. Can we stay regulated? Can we find enough cues of safety welcomes to offset the warnings? Or do the warnings take over and then we move into dysregulation? That's really the key. If the warnings outweigh the welcomes, you are going to move into survival. That is what your system's going to do. And so part of this work in the workbook is to identify what those things are, and then can I deepen my welcomes to take care of some of the warnings. But if I was looking around the world, and we could each look around our own little bubbles that we live in. If you looked around your bubble, are more people regulated or dysregulated in the small bubble you have in this moment? And again, it's a changing thing today. As I look around, and I've been out in the world with some people doing things, I would say I have a lot of regulated humans in my world, in my small bubble. If I move out into the larger bubble, there are a lot of dysregulated people. And the problem is, we have great groups of people who are dysregulated in fight and flight, in anger, anxiety. And then we have great groups of people who are in that collapse, despair, give up place. We don't have enough people anchored in ventral. And until we can build the group of people anchored in ventral, we can't have the difficult conversations that need to happen, and we can't engage in the work that needs to happen to come together and find a way to move our world forward, because you can't do that from dysregulation. Right. So, I'm going to robot pirate. I'm going to try and hold down the hope that regulation is beginning to ripple out in the world. Although I think that we are all, again, I guess I'll go back to this place of our own nervous system. The systems need to change. The big systems need to change. I get overwhelmed thinking about that. I don't know how to do that. I do not how to have any of that happen, but I can come here again, which is why I think understanding your own nervous system is essential. I can come here. I can find my way to regulation. I can grab an anchor. I can do the things I need to do to be regulated. From that place of regulation, I am now putting out into the world through neuroception a welcome. And as I send a welcome out into the world, other nervous systems will receive that. So it's sort of a way that I think, I often say we change the world one nervous system at a time. It starts with mine, and then it will ripple out. So if we can each perhaps try and do that, then I think there'll be more regulated people in the world, and the world will change.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah, let's bring it true, right? Let's bring it to life, please, because we need it.
Thanks, everybody, for your questions. I want to remind you that we've been speaking with the fantastic Deb Dana about her newest book, The Nervous System Workbook. I've got my copy here. It's a fantastic workbook, really accessible, practical exercises to ease anxiety, find safety, and come home to yourself using Polyvagal Theory. Deb, how can people work with you? Do you offer different courses? Can they work with you one-on-one?
I no longer do one-on-one. I do a lot of consultation and supervision for professionals. I have a lot of courses. We're creating some new ones. All that's on the website. There are lots of free things on the website. So yeah, come to Rhythm of Regulation and see what's there. And my wish would be that I would meet people sometime in person, because I think in person we feel the joy of that human connection. So I'll be out in the world, and if you're somewhere where I am, come introduce yourself and say hi.
Deb Dana, everybody, thank you so much, Deb.
It's lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyan Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele, and I'm your host, Ross McKeechie. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyan Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyan.com.